Good morning. Thank you, Alan, and thank you all for coming. This has been a very productive partnership with Child Trends, and I'd like to thank the other co-authors who made this work and this presentation possible, Nicole Bateman from Brookings, and Vanessa Sachs and Alex Demand from Child Trends. I'd also like to thank, as Alan said, the Annie Casey Foundation for their support, as well as State Farm. And before I launch into things, let me give you a brief overview of how the presentation will go. I will talk a little bit about our research question and our data source. Then Chris will describe two key definitions, and then Kelly, who I think of as our methodological maestro, will describe our analytical approach and findings. Then I'll come back and discuss the implication and recommendations. Our research question is to examine how young people find their way to high-quality jobs in adulthood. Chris will describe how we measure job quality, and we put a lot of thought into it. I will add that we focused on job quality at age 29 specifically, or 30 or 31, depending on data, to allow people enough time to finish high school, enroll in college or training, maybe have some detours along the way, and have time to settle into a job that may have career potential and pay enough to live on. And we also wanted to narrow our focus and look specifically at young adults less likely to enroll in and complete college right after high school because, believe it or not, researchers do not set out to prove the obvious, and we were not interested in proving that the best predictor of having a high-quality job is to come from a middle-class family, go immediately to college, graduate on time, and then launch your career. We wanted to focus on people for whom that path is less accessible and less clearly marked. And Chris will tell you more about how we estimated who those folks are. Then our goal was to identify whether there were particular education, training, employment, or other experiences in people's teens and in their early to mid-20s associated with getting a high-quality job. And to do that, you need data. We used the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth 1997. This is a nationally representative survey of people born between 1980 and 1984. Maybe some of you are in this room. And it was launched in 1997 when the respondents were in their teens. And it has followed them over time through 17 rounds of questions thus far every year or so, asking a detailed set of questions about their lives and experiences, including education and employment. And next up, Chris will describe how we use this data.
Thanks, Martha. Well, what makes for a good job? It isn't any one thing we decided, but an amalgam of positive characteristics. We identified 4 constructs. Wages matter, of course, but so do fringe benefits like health insurance and retirement plans. And work hours also matter, with too many hours or too few hours being undesirable, though what is just right does vary across individuals. We were able to measure these constructs with data from the NLSY, as Martha said, and fortunately, the database also asked a subjective question about job satisfaction. This added dimension allows us to recognize that some people are very satisfied with working long hours, working in the gig economy, or working in a job they love, even though the pay is modest. Coding these 4 constructs on a common metric, though, was, of course, a challenge. We decided on a common code comprised of 3 categories: low quality, medium quality, and high quality. For wages, 0 is low quality, and it's coded if the respondent's wage on their main job falls below 200% of the federal poverty level. 1 is medium quality, and that's a wage that falls between 201 and 399% of poverty. While 2 equals high quality. That's a wage that falls at 400% or more. Fringe benefits were coded similarly, based on the information in the NLSY, which covered whether workers get paid leave, have a retirement plan, or have health insurance. Low quality or zero is coded if they don't get any of these benefits. Medium is coded if they get one or two of these, while high quality means they have all three kinds of benefits. Well, work hours is really tough. We know that fewer hours generally means lower income, while long hours can undermine physical and mental health. So we decided to isolate the extremes. Low quality was defined as either 1 to 20 hours or 61 or more hours. Medium quality was defined as either 21 to 30 or 51 to 60 hours, while high quality category includes 31 to 50 hours. Finally, the measure of job satisfaction is coded in a pretty straightforward manner. Low quality is coded when the respondent says they dislike their job or they think it's okay. Medium quality is when they like their job somewhat, and high quality is when they say they like their job very much. So each of these attributes has a score of 0, 1, or 2, and each is equally weighted. So the measure of job quality is an index that runs from 0 to 8. This is our dependent variable, the outcome of interest. It has a decent distribution, as you can see here. We think of low quality as 0, 1, or 2, and that's 2%, 4, 8%. Medium quality is 3, 4, 5, most people there, 9, 17, and 21%. And higher quality jobs are in the 20, 13, and 4% for those categories. Turning to our sample, we wanted to examine the predictors of a good job among young adults from backgrounds that were disadvantaged. Again, we didn't resonate to the notion that there's just one type of disadvantage. So we chose several measures of disadvantage that might characterize the background of a teenager. These include family income at or less than 200% of the federal poverty line, neither parent has a post-secondary degree, or family receipt of public assistance, or the respondent's mother was in her teens when her first child was born. And of course, to study job quality, we needed a sample of young adults who were working. We looked at young adults at age 29 if they were not working then, we looked at age 30 or 31, so as not to lose cases. So our analytic sample is then employed young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds. This chart notes that most young adults are working, but young adults from backgrounds that were disadvantaged are less likely to be working than those who did not have any of these disadvantages in their background, 79% compared with 90%. Of course, young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds may work at quite different jobs than young adults who are not similarly disadvantaged. This is, of course, why we wanted to study good jobs. And we do find that young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds are not only less likely to be working, but if they are employed, they are less likely to have a good job. For this descriptive analysis, we defined a good job as scoring 6 to 8 on the Job Quality Index. This chart shows that just 38% of employed young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds had good jobs, compared with 48% of those who were not similarly disadvantaged. Now, Kelly will provide an overview of our analytic strategy and results.
So to answer a research question, we just conducted descriptive analyses like the frequencies that Chris just shared earlier, as well as a path analysis, which is an extension of multiple regression. And the use of the path analysis allowed us to account for the relationship between each predictor variable and our outcome variable of job quality at age 29, which really enabled us to get at the unique or additive influence of each predictor variable on job quality. And finally, to address issues with missing data, which is really common in longitudinal research, we used a statistical estimator known as full information maximum likelihood, or FIML. And we grouped our predictor variables into 4 categories: education, training, employment, and a broad category that we refer to as demographic or other variables. And we included this last category because research has shown that demographic factors such as gender, race, ethnicity, cognitive ability, as well as life experiences such as incarceration or teen parenthood are all related to later employment outcomes. Thus, by including these factors in our model, we are able to statistically control for their effect on job quality and really get at the more unique effects of various education, training, and employment experiences. And as Martha mentioned earlier, we are interested in understanding how a variety of experiences from age 16 all the way through age 27 affected job quality at age 29. And because these experiences look very different at different periods in one's life, we developed 3 age windows. So we defined our first age window as adolescence, spanning from ages 16 to 19. And this age window included predictor variables such as participation in a career training and technical education program or CTE program, participation in workforce training programs outside of high school, having a paid internship, and various metrics of teen employment. The second age window, which we refer to as emerging adulthood, spans from ages 20 to 23 and includes experiences such as participating in a training program, unemployment, and having a paid internship, as well as wages at age 23. And our last age window is young adulthood, which we define as spanning ages 24 to 27 and includes variables such as highest degree earned at age 27, earning a training certificate by age 27, and unemployment. And before I move on to the results, I just want to explain 2 terms that will likely be unfamiliar, and that's because we created them for this analysis. So the NLS-Y 97 has 7 different categories of career and technical education programs. However, due to sample size constraints, we couldn't look at each program by itself. So to address this, we grouped the programs into 2 different categories. So we categorize cooperative education programs, internships, apprenticeships, and mentoring programs as relationship-based CTE programs, and this is because their program design makes it likely that students will develop a positive relationship with an adult outside of school. Internships and cooperative education programs strive to place students in workplaces with engaged supervisors who provide guidance and support, and the whole point of mentoring is really to build a supportive relationship. So we recognize that program implementation and quality varies, and we couldn't be sure how strong the relationships that were developed in these programs actually were. But still, in that end, we thought threading together this thread of relationships was strong enough to group these 3 programs together. The other group includes career majors, tech prep, school-sponsored enterprise, and job shadowing. And the first 3 are all school-based, and while students can and do build strong relationships with teachers, we thought the relationships with an adult outside of school was notable. Job shadowing does take place in the workplace and involves a relationship with a working adult, but it's typically of a much shorter duration than these relationship-based ones and is designed more for career exposure than substantive work over time. So moving on to the results, as one would expect, cognitive test scores, coming of age during the Great Recession, experiencing incarceration and unemployment, and obtaining a high school diploma or post-secondary degree are all related to job quality at age 29. We found that both teen employment, which we defined as having a job between the ages of 16 and 18, and participation in a relationship-based CTE program significantly predicted higher job quality at age 29. And the positive effects of the relationship-based CTE program is particularly notable for 2 reasons. The first is simply that later job quality was only significantly affected by CTE programs that were relationship-based. The second is that although research has generally found that the effects of participation in training programs fade away over time, This result indicates that participation in a relationship-based CTE program in high school can affect job quality over 10 years later. We also found that higher earnings at age 23 was associated with higher job quality at age 29. And given that we controlled for multiple experiences and background characteristics, this finding is notable because it reflects that no matter a young person's education, work history, or cognitive test scores, early good jobs, as measured by wages, predict later good jobs. Participation in a training program between ages 24 and 27 was associated with higher job quality at age 29, as was being married or cohabiting at age 27. And interestingly, although we found in the descriptive analyses that being Black was associated with lower job quality at age 29, once we controlled for education, employment, training experiences, and other background variables, the difference was no longer significant. In addition, being Hispanic was associated with greater job quality at age 29 than being non-Hispanic white. Finally, we found that even after controlling for education, employment, training, and background variables such as cognitive test scores, being female was associated with significantly lower job quality at age 29 than being male. Now I'll pass it to Martha, who will discuss the implications that these findings have for practice and policy.
Thank you, Kelly. So what do we do with this information? We have some thoughts. We have 4 specifically. The first is to strengthen work-based learning in high school CTE programs. Internships, apprenticeships, and co-ops all allow students to learn workplace skills through working in ways that are difficult to replicate in the classroom. And the recent reauthorization of the federal Perkins legislation should provide more momentum and funding on this front. I should note here that although this recommendation is limited to high school CTE programs because that's what our data was, and we're trying to be disciplined, there's a strong argument that work-based learning is going to be beneficial beyond the confines of high school CTE. The second recommendation is to keep pushing on college access and increase efforts on college completion of both associate's degrees and bachelor's degrees with a strong focus on quality and equity. We're not talking about diploma mills or reducing rigor or screening out students who are judged less likely to succeed. We're talking about how schools can redesign their programs and allocate their resources so that when they enroll students, they have a clearly defined goal, plan, and capacity to graduate those students. That includes proactive advising, financial aid, and assistance with emergencies, restructuring course offerings so that the path to degree is clear and user-friendly, greater alignment with high school, including dual enrollment and early college, in which high school students take college courses, and bridge programs to help prepare students for college-level work if necessary. Third is on-ramps to employment, particularly for teens and young adults without post-secondary credentials. Here I'm going to quote someone because it's always a relief to find someone who says what you were thinking, only better. So she said, "In friendlier economic times, we could largely rely on tossing young people into the economy as a way of socializing them and welcoming them into adulthood and responsibility. That option has now ended." So that quote is from Lauren Resnick in a book called Transitions in Work and Learning. These on-ramps can take different forms. They can be work-based learning in high school of the sort we discussed, as well as stronger career exploration and advising. Guidance counselors in high schools, this is not typically part of their job description, and they're already pretty overloaded. And for older youth past high school age, or for those who have left high school, these programs are more likely to be offered by nonprofits or community groups, perhaps post-secondary institutions, and they will involve work readiness, academic and skills training, as well as mentoring, paid employment, or stipends and supportive services. For each of these recommendations, though, it's important not to fall into the trap of mistaking access for quality. Access to work-based learning in high school is not sufficient. It has to be good work-based learning. That takes legwork. access to job training is insufficient, it has to be good job training. That also takes legwork, purpose, and clarity. And lastly, I would not be a researcher if I did not say this. We would like to see more research and action into the idea suggested by our CTE finding that relationships matter. This is not a new insight, but this insight is not always reflected in program design and staffing and the funding of youth employment and training programs. What would it look like if a core principle of every youth employment and education training program was to build a positive, supportive relationship between a young person and a caring adult? How would you do it? What would the effects be? How would you measure it? And not just measure it from a research point of view, but how would the program measure it so they can see how they're doing and tweak their program along the way? In conclusion, I could opine further, but believe it or not, we have something better planned. We have put together an absolutely terrific panel, and these folks are going to share their experiences and knowledge about setting young people up for success.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos from Brookings.